Ganz herzlich willkommen, a very warm welcome to our talk with Francisco Godai Vega and Brooke Andrew. I don't understand you about the impossibility of decolonization. Before I hand over to Brooke, I just want to say a few words to introduce him, but also to welcome you to our 4 days of AMA here in the installation of Emeka Okpo, AMA, a gathering place. And the installation we have here is really a wonderful metaphor for what we're trying to do with these 4 days. It's really being a place for sharing, exchanging, and especially learning as an institution about practices of care, repair, and healing. And so we worked as a team on these days to really open as many perspectives as possible to then kind of narrow it down for an exhibition, a project we're planning for next autumn. And Brooke Andrew, who's an Australian Celtic Wiradjuri artist, researcher, scholar, and curator, is playing an essential part in these 4 days here, but also then for the exhibition in autumn. And there are many different perspectives you bring to us, and one of the last big exhibitions you created is actually nearing the Sydney Biennale, which was really centered around First Nation artists led a fantastic project which opened 2 years ago now. You just handed in your PhD. You're working on a new work for our exhibition. But what you bring to us, especially I think in these collective rounds we're having for the show, is really recentering and bringing to the table different ways of indigenous thinking. And so I was very pleased when you suggested to bring Francisco here from Madrid, originally from Chile, to share your experiences, your amazing writing and research, and discuss topics which I think will be very kind of leading for our next kind of days, but also for the project we're doing. So thank you very much, and I hand over to Brooke to introduce Francisco a bit more. Enjoy.
Mandangu, Stephanie, which means thank you in Wiradjuri, which is my mother's language. There's about 300 different nations and languages in Australia, and yeah, so Ngaujing Ndaraga, which means I see you, and Mandangu, thank you for coming. And I just want to thank the whole team for putting this together, and it's great to see Mahab and other friends here. It's just really such a surprise, and I'm really so happy that Francisco's made it here. So Francisco Godai Vega is a scholar, a writer, a thinker, an activist, takes no prisoners, family member across the network, and of course Collective Ailu, who you're part of this collective, was also in the Biennale of Sydney in 2020, Niran. And I'm just wondering if you could just share with us a little bit more about, before we dive into intergenerational violence, resistance, healing, and the kind of failure of the decolonial process, etc. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing at the moment, and really how you kind of arrived to this thing about, well, what is the decolonial?
Okay. Well, good afternoon. First of all, this sound is so big. First of all, thank you, Brooke, and the institution, Gropius Baus, for the invitation to this talk. It's a pleasure to be back in Berlin. Last time I was here, I was talking to you about it, was like 11 years ago, for an exhibition about decolonization, of course, where I was a curatorial assistant, and it was a very, very complicated project called the Potosi Principle. Maybe some of you have listened about it. White artists reading colonial processes and trying to understand colonial pain. That is something very, very difficult, and that's part of the impossibility that I wanted to pose today in this talk. But yeah, I'm, as Brooke said, I'm part of this collective called IU Collective. We work in the middle of artistic practices and activism in the public space, creating family. IU in Quechua language means family, an extended family, a non-blood family, elected family. A family of affection, mainly a family of pain, where we connect different diasporic experiences in the Spanish context, but from people coming from Abya Yala, from Latin America, people coming from Africa, and people coming from Asia. So trying to connect all those pains produced by the colonial project. The colonial project and the decolonial project, both of them. In this sense, I just wanted to mention very quickly that we are not minorities, we are majorities. White supremacy is the minority. They are very, very little. We can think in Europe, it's a very, very little point in the geography. And most of the subaltern bodies, the subalternized territories, we are the majority. And our memories have been stolen. That's why you always say, my name, Francisco Godoy Vega. I have two Spanish names. That's not because I am Spanish and my granddad was Spanish. It is because of the original rape, the rape of our ancestors, and how the masters rule our naming. We didn't have even the chance to decide our names. Our names were decided by the owners of the lands, the new owners of the lands, and in that sense, I'm coming to your question, me and many other people, we are working on the recovery of those memories that have been stolen. How to recover a memory that it is not written. It is not in the archives. It's a memory that we have to, and that's our artistic and intellectual work, how to reconnect with those memories and at the same time invent those memories, because those memories have been cut.
Gracias. I mean, really, you're talking about childhood, intergenerational racist violence, intergenerational resistance, and it's a very interesting thing on the international kind of agenda, and it's really, fantastic that you've outlined, population. If we look at, Earth's population and the kind of colonial extreme, I'm just wondering if you could share with us, not in any order, but as we were talking about before, intergenerational racist violence and also intergenerational resistance. But also the childhood memory that you've written about in the Niran catalogue is so poetic and beautiful that you cross that line. And maybe in some ways, if you could start with that memory that you talk about. And
well, when I was thinking on this talk with you and our chat through WhatsApp, I was thinking in those memories of childhood that, of course, are personal, like how, for example, my nickname in Chile was Peruvian, because in Chilean imaginary, Chilean people is white and Peruvian people is brown. So my nickname was always like, you don't belong here, you don't belong to this country because you are too brown, too indigenous feature to be Chilean. Chilean is a very, very racist society. But at the same time, I was kind of remembering, and when I say remembering, it is not like only my memories, but a collective memory. I really feel, and I say feel because it's like here, I really feel that my memory is not my memory, but it's a collective memory that has 500 years of pain. It's a collective memory, it's a colored memory, it's a silence memory, it's a memory that had been silent, but at the same time, that silence had been a way of resistance through the whisper of our grandmoms, our granddads. And in that sense, that memory, it is not a memory understood in a linear, in an evolutionary way of understanding memory, like something that happened in the 16th century belonged to the 16th century. My granddad, for example, he was Aymara, from the Aymara culture, and in the Aymara culture, there is something that people say all the time, that is to walk with the past in front. I walk with the past in front of me. It is not the history that it's something that happened, but this history is something that is happening. And what happened in 16th century is still alive. I'm not sure if I'm getting kind of confused, but that long memory of 500 years of colonial violence is a memory, of course, of genocide. It's an epistemicidio. It is also a memory where the sexual dissidencies have been cut, where all the religious and spiritual practices that connect with the earth, with the river, with the sea have been cut through the Catholic religion, in the case of the country that have been colonized by the Spanish and Portuguese settlers. But at the same time, all that memory that it's a memory of pain, and that's a question that I always have in my mind, that is how to deal with a memory of pain that is so long, 500 years of pain, how you manage, not in a psychological terms, like I'm going to the divan and I'm going to feel better with all the racism that I live in Spain or in Europe, whatever. It is not a matter of psychological thing. It is not even a matter of sociological thing. It's not something that we will manage to help these indigenous people in this territory, etc. It is a matter of making upside down this history of 500 years of violence. And when I think on those, all that pain that we have in our bodies, I also think in all the resistance that have been alive for those 500 years. Resistance that comes from a very radical position of, I prefer to call anti-colonialism. That was something that happened in many territories of Abya Yala, of Latin America. I think in figures like Atuey, that was an indigenous person from the Caribbean, who sent the settlers down to the sea, like he really killed them, like pushing them to the, pushing the settlers to the sea, so they die. I'm thinking on Haiti, that is probably the most castigated territories in the Caribbean, and how the slaves, for example, Macanda, use medicine plants to kill the colonizers, to kill the settlers in the food, like I'm giving this, I'm your slave, I have to cook for you, and I will kill you through the cooking. It is a strategy of resistance that is so elegant for me, so elegant the way of saying, I'm not going to be your slave anymore. And for example, in the case of Haiti, you know that Haiti was the first independence in the continent, in the whole continent, except, well, the US. And when they make the Declaration of Independence, what they say is, they ask, when are we going to get tired of having the same air than the white people? We don't want to share the same air with the white people. That's why this is a black country. And this is a statement that separates and make a radical division. That is a division that was not invented by the racialized people, but it was invented by white supremacy. White supremacy, since the beginning of colonization, decided who was a subject, who has the power of decision, who has the power of knowledge, who has the power of money, and who will be closer to animals. Animals that can be exploited, and that had those savage, the invention of the savage, that have to be exploded and at the same time have to be educated. And that is the complicated position when we establish dialogues or we establish artistic processes of collaboration that in many cases can come down into this possibility of recovering the what Theo called the white savior industrial complex, like how white artists, white institutions, white collectives, white activists can all the time recover those spirit of we will save you. We will always save you. And I think that there is this point of making the separation that have been created by white supremacy, but reaffirm that separation to create spaces maybe to heal. That is something that we can end.
Thank you. I mean, these are really, lives that we live and can be complicated for other people who don't understand these perspectives. But I think that if I can bring it back to, the thing around violence and resistance, I mean, it just reminds me of the work of Collective Ailu, and the importance of, when it is in Madrid, and it supports, trans and other, BIPOC, queer people in a space where the violence is still so extreme even today. And when you talk about that, the collective and the the kinship that the collective supports, I mean, that's really also about looking at violence and resistance.
Yeah, that I think, or I feel, that the racial division of the world that was founded in 1492 with Christopher Columbus and so on, and all the other guys that were there, including German people, of course, like Humboldt, this racial division of the world was created in those sense of a violent sense that hurt us, hurt our ancestors. So I think that we have to bring back that violence memory. We cannot imagine a process of decolonization that is nice for everyone. Like we will all be happy, we are very decolonized, and we come back home, we come back to the streets, we come back to the square, and the violence is still there for the racialized people, while white people will come back to their comfortability. You know, so it is very important for us, and it's something that we work in the collective, how not to avoid violence, but how to live with the violence. And the whole process of colonization was a violent process in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, etc. Was a violent process of imposing one way of life, one way of living, one way of believing. So the process of decolonization to open that unity of the Western project must be also a process of violence, an inverted process of violence. And to protect ourselves, it is important to talk among ourselves, to encounter ourselves without the supervision of white supremacy, and that's something that we have been working very, very much, and I think that creating these spaces of so-called safe spaces, there is no safe space in anywhere, but creating spaces where we can share the different layers of those memories that connect our pains. Because of course, my pain is different from a pain of somebody who comes from Congo or somebody who comes from the Philippines. But there is point of encounter there. There is an structure that is white supremacy who pressure us for many, many, many years. So then there is this kind of creating a community of pain that is at the same time a community of love. And in that sense, I think always in the politics of time, first of all, in terms of the time not considered in this capitalistic Western way of understanding time, like in this industrial machine, you know, where you have to be produced, that because we have to be produced to be alive, but recovering those indigenous knowledge of time that are connected with other traditions, that is not this linear time. It's a circular time. It's a time to come back again to the same point all the time. We don't need progress. We don't need evolution. And at the same time, I think in the politics of time, I live in Europe, so there is a context where we live. There is a condition where we live, and time is always little. There is always little time for everything, for meeting a friend, for having sex, for everything. There is little time for living. So something that is very important is how we invest that time. And we took the decision to use that time, my free time, my non-free time, to be with queer people of color. And that is constructing a community. Love queer people of color. Make love to queer people of color. Go to the hospital with queer people of color. Go to to take the metro, because taking the metro sometimes for some people is a violent situation. And that's something that we have to be very aware that in different contexts, certain bodies, and especially trans people, is very, very fragile in front of the different institutions, the social system, or if you need to go to a doctor, etc. So spending our time to being together among queer people of color. And I think that maybe we can see the video because we bring a little video that it's a march of the gay parade, that in Madrid there is a critical gay parade confronting like the pink capitalism, but inside that critical gay parade there is we have a special area only for people of color, where white people is not admitted. That is something that can generate tensions, but at the same time, I think it's a way of imagine some healing. So maybe we can watch the video.
Por lo de Aguilera, pero no por nada más. Y Cristina también. Por el apellido. Es un poco raro. Hacerse la cara tan grande. Es que me está demasiado cerca.
Corona.
Igual se pega, ¿sabes? Sí. Yo solo metería el durazo. Y una lágrima.
I have the microphone back. You know, when you bought this, you know, and the Collective Ailu bought this video as part of the Sydney Biennale, I remember that because when we come to visit the studio space in Madrid, it was a very important place for people who, you know, were also homeless as well. So, you know, as you say, you talk about family, but also we know that Jos was also abused in Sydney as well. And even within our own communities, like, you know, some of us look Celtic like me, some of us look, you know, Asian because they're, you know, mum or dad's Japanese, etc. So in our Indigenous communities, we're very mixed. And it's interesting, this thing that you're talking about, this violence, because if you're fair skin or you don't look like, you know, whatever you're supposed to look like by the anthropological machine, we're the ones that have to get the taxis, right? Because we're not going to get thrown out. And it's a very awkward position, but we're living with this, and I just want to kind of acknowledge what you've said around resistance and the resistance of violence, but in a space of healing, because the way that we connect on this international level, when you're saying the Philippines or the Congo or, you know, Aotearoa in New Zealand, doesn't matter, Australia, doesn't matter where you are, the resistance for hundreds of years has been really invisibility. So when you talk about the resistance of, you know, people poisoning the food or pushing people off the cliffs, I mean, really in Australia, the Australian context is really there are very few sites of violence and genocide and massacres that actually have a memorial. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation about memorialisation, what's memorialised, what's not, what's visible, what's not. And so living with this and how we can kind of transform being in a space where you're living with continual violence, but also it's this attitude of time and circular time. It's the same with Wiradjuri. It's a very different way and attitude to time, and therefore it affects everything. And I think coming back to what is the, you know, the failure of the decolonial process, it really, there's a legacy of terminologies which was really championed out of South America, but other, terminology. So in Wiradjuri we use Yindyamarra Gunana, and Yindyamarra is a really a thing of respect, and having respect, taking time, taking things slowly, and that's not a direct kind of translation of the decolonial term, but I've decided that I don't even want to use that term. Other people can use that term, and it's very important for other people, regardless if you're Indigenous or not, or it doesn't matter who you are, what you are, that word means something, and it's not necessarily meaning the same thing that Walter Manolo and other people mean it to be, which is the problem. But other friends, like my Sami friend from Norway, Lisa Ravna, uses the word samadaten, which is kind of, she explains, as a form of, you know, Samification, like indigenization. My Bunan Taiwanese friend Buyong Imashasa uses Bunan tu Taklas, which is more about a creative form of decolonization or empowerment. Yeah. And then Lauli Ashragi, the Samoan Persian curator and artist, uses the word, Samoan is such a fantastic language, so I'm going to do my best. Fa'alia Ganoe. And maybe we could then launch into, especially after that space of healing, and maybe, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about the video, otherwise, you know, maybe we can launch into the decolonial process coming out of South America and why it's a failure.
Well, in relation to a video and what you said in about our space, our studio in Madrid that we don't have anymore, but we have our houses, that is how we work, and we sleep and we eat. And I think that the video show how we dance, and I think dance, music, collective dance, it's a way of healing. In a non-rational way. Cooking together is a way of healing. Getting drunk together is a way of healing. healing doesn't really pass through the, first of all, of course, through the medical system, not even the psychological system. And yeah, and in relation to, well, to constructing this community, constructing this resistance, considering also this long memory of resistance, that's why I talk about the impossibility of decolonization. If we think in the process of decolonization in Latin America, most of them, except Haiti, I think you need to say in Haiti in English, except Haiti, all of them were led by white people. The local white people that continue the process of the settlers, the colonizers, in a new state, in a new republic, independent from the ex-metropolis. But the people who did those processes were the children of the conqueror. So there is a continuity on the process of the decolonization of those territories, and in that sense, we inhabit the impossibility of decolonize the self, decolonize the common in a framework that is structurally racist. It doesn't work if it's not racist. The only way that racism is taken or passed by, it is through tokenism. That is something that happened to me, for example, when I work in Reina Sofia Museum in Madrid. We are the tokens. You know, for this project called the Potosi Principle, they needed somebody, first of all, brown, and secondly, from those territories to make the negotiations. They couldn't be just these 3 white German curators doing this exhibition about colonization, capitalism, etc., without having a token. And that's something that happened all the time. I'm not even the best example. There are many other examples, much more clear, of tokenism, that it's very, very, it's a position very, very difficult to avoid, because we need to enter to the institution, we need to eat, we need to buy food, to pay trains, etc. So it's always in this tension, and it's a very complicated thing. I don't know exactly in the German context, but at least in the Spanish context, the decolonial have been a trending topic, a buzzword, as you said. Everything wants to be decolonized. I have been in seminars in MACBA in Barcelona, for example, decolonizing the museum, then decolonizing Europe, then decolonizing the university, at seminars. Other people talking, let's decolonize the bed, let's decolonize the bathroom, etc. So it is funny, but at the same time it's not funny, because it had been so ridiculous to imagine that you can, making a seminar will change the structure of their own institutions. Making a seminar inviting 2 indigenous, 2 black, 2 Asian, etc., and then you have a beautiful table without white people, without white European people, 1 day, 2 day talking, and then you come back to the structure of the institution, and if you don't change the structure of the institution, you maintain the institution as a white institution and as a white supremacist institution. Then there are these tokens, of course. Oak Werwenson was at the moment director of the House der World Cultures in Munich, like the first black director of a cultural institution, etc. And then it always happened. Now the MACBA in Barcelona has a black director, the first black director in a cultural institution in Spain. But that does really change the way of living the institution, the way of using the institution, the way of, we understand also the notion of art, even how art is useful, and not only an aesthetic experience as the Western project in trying to impose. Not you understand it art as part of our life, but as something different you have to contemplate. And that is something that we have been working very, very hard, and it had been very difficult to deal with the institution when we said, like you mentioned, our studio. No, here we are not only 5 artists of the collective, we are a community. And this space that have very nice and comfortable sofas, that have Wi-Fi, that have heating, you said for heating? Heating, it will be used by our community. And if they need to sleep here, they will sleep here. And that was a whole mess with the institutional order, because they don't expect artists living the art, living through the art, using art to earn some money to live, not to produce art in a capitalistic way. And
Now, can I ask you a quick question about that? Because when the collective came to Sydney, and when you did your installation in Art Space, it was very important for you to work with other volunteers, people of colour, etc., because that was a very urgent thing where you wanted, well, I mean, that's what we did, you know, like regardless where people came from, we kind of, you know, set people up with you know, where they felt like they, you know, were really leading the project. And then maybe if you could mention something about that, and then if we've got, then we'll have just a few minutes for a couple of questions. What do you think?
yeah, I wanted to mention about the words you said, like
Yeah.
the terms.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we're going to do the, yeah.
Yeah. So the colonial have become a trending topic, have become whitewashed, like queer also have been whitewashed. Queer originally was a word used for queer people of color, Latinos and black people in the United States, and have been whitewashed. The colonial have been whitewashed. And so when we talk with Brooke about this, like how to escape to this concept, we use anti-colonial. That is something that has a long memory also from, for example, the Maya culture in Central America, the Mapuche culture in the south of Patagonia, and those anti-colonial practices implying creating territories free of white people. The Mayas were not colonized. They divided, they create a frontier between the territory of the settlers and the territory of the Maya people. The same happened with the Mapuche people in the south of Argentina and Chile. They created a frontier, an agreement, because the settlers were so tired, because they created a city, they founded a city, and Mapuche burned that city. And that happened once and again and again and again, and they were like, okay, we cannot deal with this, we are going to create a frontier, so you have your own territory. And from Mapuche culture, that part of my family came from that side too, there are some words that I think are important to understand the colonization, or what could be the colonization without the decolonial. And I think in words like Newen, that are the spirits not in terms of Catholic terms, but the spirits that are alive in mountains, in trees, in rivers. I think in another terms called marichiweu, that it's a term that means 1,000 times we will win. And of course, Mapuche people always lose. They are always losing because now the white Chileans kill them, they produce a lot of violence against Mapuche communities, but they scream permanently, Marichiweu, 1,000 times we will win. And also I bring three other works. One is Pachacuti. Pacha is the Mother Earth in Aymara culture. And Pachacuti, it's a sort of upside down of the word. It's when the Pacha, the Mother Earth, reverts, it moves, and it decides, not by rational decision, but the Earth's decision that this has to be changed. And the global warming thing, it's something in that sense. And then Sumak Kausai, which means it is not translatable like that, but it's the good living, how to live good. And it is not living good in terms of like having capitalistic condition of living, but living good in connection with the other entities of the earth, not considering the humans as something more important than the others. And to finish, I wanted to mention one word that it comes from the slavery trade from Africa, which is malembe. And malembe, there are many songs in Latin America using this word. It comes from the Congo, and malembe means to live inevitably with the pain. How to live with the pain inside and not avoid it. And malembe is we will dance, but we will dance suffering at the same time. How to navigate that contradiction that is inherent. We cannot say like we are all happy now, but how to live permanently with the pain.
Mandangu, do you want to see if anyone wants to? Has anyone got a question or want to have a conversation?
Thank you for that. That was super interesting. I wanted to ask you, from quite a personal place. Like my family is from the Caribbean. My grandmother was Carib, part of the indigenous people there. But my parents went to England for economic prospects, and of course brought me up to talk the Queen's English. And when I was taken back to see my grandmother, I was already quite old. And my grandmother would talk Creole to me, and I had no idea what she was saying. And I was a little kid, but I thought, what is she speaking? She's speaking this childish. That's what it was. My mind was coded to speak BBC English, and that language was lost to me. How do you recuperate what was lost? How do you?
Wow, that's a huge question, because I think it's something that happened to many of us. For example, my grandfather, he lived the territory, his original territory. He moved to the capital, and he broke with everything, tradition, even with his mother. And there is so much diaspora since 20th century from the Caribbean, from India, from different ex-colonies, that people came to Europe. And of course, your mother wants you to talk like the Queen. Of course, your mother wants you to look as white as possible, because that make you have better condition of life. And it's something very easy to understand, that our fathers want us to be like as Western as possible, as white as possible, as having they wanted us to be good, to be healthy, to have good conditions. So it's very, very difficult to reconnect with those erased memories. But I think there is a process in one hand, that is something inside of you that you cannot manage rationally. You cannot say like, okay, today I'm going to talk Creole and I'm going to stop talking like the Queen. That can't happen. You know, it is something that is not rational, and it's vibrant. I think something that is vibrant inside of us, and it's a memory that is vibrant inside of us. And on the other hand, I think we have to reinvent our memories, because those memories are not in the university classes, are not in in the colonial archives, because those memories pass through the whisper. What your grandmother talked to your mother and that your mother talked to you in the kitchen or in the bathroom. It is not something that is written in these big books of Western history. So we have to reinvent from very, very little fragments of memory, of things that pass through the voice, but at the same time pass through the food, through ways of constructing communal experiences. It is something that it's not, it cannot be put in a box of like, okay, today I'm going to come back to the Caribe in my mind. So it's something that it goes through many experiences, and I think those little experiences are the experiences that can help to heal. And when I say to heal, it's not to heal your pain, but it's to heal the pain of your grandmother, to heal the pain of the grandmother of your grandmother, to try to heal pains of our Newens, our spirits that are still alive. They are not died, you know. They are not dead in a just passed by. They are still alive, and they need to be helped to be better.
Well, we have 1 minute. I'm tasked with the timekeeper.
So it's actually, my name is Rafael. I'm from Brazil. I live here. And I know that Colectivo IU has also sort of an education program, which is the POPs, right? And I wanted to hear a little more about this experience of a form of education that comes from using the word and the decolonial knowledge, and as a way of also hacking the institution, because as you said, there's this need of the money that comes, of course. There's no other way of living besides like of this denial of the system. It's way better than through the hacking of the system. Then I wanted to hear a little more of, anyways, about POPs, and also if future plans or whatever is up with POPs now. Gracias.
Okay, well, we don't have too much time, I think. Well, thank you for the question. Yeah, we created this study program that is called Program Oriented to Subaltern Practices. And the main thing for us was to recognize knowledges, non-white knowledges, It's a kind of university without white professors. That it's something that it's kind of like upside down world, you know, because in all the universities in Europe, in South America, etc., universities are full of white people teaching about everything, because something that happened with white supremacy is that white supremacy allows you to talk about everything. Even though you haven't been in a territory, you can talk about that territory. Even though you are not queer, you can talk about queerness, etc., etc., etc. And that's something very, very tough, and it's something that it is repeated through the university system. So in this program, we have invited people of color to teach, and also recognizing knowledges that had not been validated by the academia. We invited sex workers to teach, for example, migrant sex workers, or indigenous people like a Mapuche leader without any education, any formal education. So it's a way to recognize that the subaltern practices have been alive for many, many years without needing the validation of the academia. And also when passed by the academia, what happened is that it is whitewashed, it loses all its potential of living by the Chicago-style system of quotation. So we are trying, and I used to teach at university, and I stopped it. But it's very important to think and to imagine and to live knowledge, and this is a kind of thing that I'm working on, like how to live knowledge, not in terms of doing a paper, but in terms of knowledge as a way of living.
Thank you so much, and I'm sure you guys can keep, talking from here, but I know there's another talk happening right now as well, but I'd just like to thank you all, and thank you, Francisco.
Thank you,
Mandangu.
Brooke.